Well, hello, and thanks for watching another episode of News of the Pews, where you can count on unapologetic 2A advocacy. Gun rights are human rights. I'm certain you gentlefolk are painfully aware of the Trump administration's fickle relationship with gun rights, but they managed to stumble across the goal line with one more point. They even got it into the right end zone, if I'm remembering my sport ball metaphors properly.
Foosball.
Get this. The U.S. Department of Justice, under red flag Bondi, filed an amicus brief in opposition to gun control. I know. Wild, ain't it? The DOJ's 26-page friend of the court brief specifically takes Massachusetts control freaks to task for the approved firearms roster because it places prior restraint on the arms. They also took the time to dismantle the ridiculous notion put forth by dark side lawyers that buying and selling arms are ancillary activities not directly protected by the Second Amendment's plain text by saying, the Supreme Court has established that the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms protects both owning and carrying firearms, and in order to do either of those things, the right must also include the right to acquire a firearm. Inquiring whether the litigants in a case had other means to acquire similar firearms or other firearms at all is simply not part of the Second Amendment equation.
Math, 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 math.
But hey, it would be impossible for us to produce quality 2A propaganda without you. So if you are in a comfortable place in life, please help us stay in a comfortable place in life by contributing to our tip jars in the doobly-doo or by joining our channel, and as always, keep us in your prayers. If Australia isn't the cuck chair, it's at least the cuck beanbag. They don't have a Second Amendment. Their government doesn't recognize the God-given right of all men to resist aggression by means of armed force if needed. They don't even have a First Amendment, but they do pay lip service to the notion of free speech, and that's how one gun owner down under hopes to get his guns back. See, Joshua Hoth is an aficionado of bad Austrian artists, or at least he used to be, maybe. Hoth claims he only joined the neo-Nazi National Socialist Network to socialize and exercise with men. But when cops searched his house, they found 2 copies of the book Minecraft, as well as a framed photo on his nightstand of him in the arms of Gabriel Seymour, the leader of the Queensland chapter of the NSF. The natural question, which so-called journalists never seem to ask, is why were cops searching his home in the first place?
Pre-crime cops from Minority Report.
Well, the answer to that question is it turns out they were spying on protesters at an event memorializing Mylene White, a 70-year-old woman who was stabbed to death in a carjacking by a 16-year-old boy who some say is a Sudanese refugee. They identified Hoth at the protest, found that he had a gun license, and searched his house. Then they revoked his license. So, where do I start with this dystopian mess? Well, for one thing, people shouldn't have to grovel before the crown in order to procure life support equipment. And cops shouldn't be spying on protesters in a free country. And people shouldn't have legal action against them from the government on the grounds of their political beliefs. But Hoth or Houth or Hoth or whatever he is facing a tough uphill battle, because while I agree the government should not consider how mainstream his opinions are in granting permission for anything, well, these licenses are entirely discretionary, and Australians don't have any codified protections for speech. So I'm afraid the Ubermensch is probably not getting his guns back. And I'm sure you, dear viewer, are just all broken up about that, but consider the surveillance state apparatus that led to this. It's beyond just a neo-Nazi. This is an incident where agents of the state logged his participation in unpopular speech and targeted him to ultimately seize his property. It's like some kind of dystopian penal colony down there.
I'd love to give you a kiss, but I'm not gonna push it that far.
And after their recent terrorist attack, the police state enthusiasts are full send, to the point where they think they can prevent people from sharing STL files. Not kidding. Their parliament is pushing through a law making it a crime to possess blueprints that can be used to squirt guns or parts. Because that works so well with malware, and scripts, and pirated software, and decryption algorithms. Seriously, Wendover did a great video on illegal numbers. You should absolutely check that out if you haven't heard of the concept before, because there's a very real possibility that you're actually violating federal law right now.
That's not important right now.
The point is, ideas are infectious and you can't stop the signal. It is the height of hubris for the rulers in that underworld to think they can ban files, and it's also darkly disturbing that they even want to try. And I'm sure some people won't care what happens in the Upside Down, but how many times have control freaks over here pointed to Australia as the platonic ideal of what gun control ought to look like? I'm sure control freaks in New Mexico would salivate at the chance to pass the kinds of bans that Australia has, but for the meantime, they'll have to tide themselves over with a total ban on gas-operated long guns and their new Stop Illegal Gun Trade and Extremely Dangerous Weapons Act, which has the catchy acronym SIGTEDWA. And yeah, did you catch that? Surely they meant semi-auto, right? No, they literally meant and defined gas-operated in the text. As always, I'll link the source in the doobly-doo, but there is no mention in the draft statute of recoil-operated systems. Manually operated guns are explicitly exempted, but no mention is made of roller or bearing-delayed blowback, straight blowback, long recoil, inertia like the Benelli system, or even gas-delayed blowback. Because as everyone knows, an HK91 is less dangerous than an AR-15.
But wait, there's more.
The bill also places more security requirements on gun shops than Walter and Jesse had in that basement under the laundromat. It requires shops to install monitored alarm systems and video surveillance with 2 years of archived storage. Nobody under 21 would be allowed to work in a gun shop, and they would have to use NICS to do background checks for all employees. Except it's illegal to use NICS in that manner. And what's even more wild is the politicritters seem to be aware of that fact when they wrote the law, because they tacked on this little gem to the end. Only if the use of the National Instant Criminal Background Check System is permitted by federal regulations. Why not just strike that language once they knew it was non-functional? Because they hope to make it legal to abuse NICS in that manner at the federal level. Or is my tinfoil on too tight?
See how fast I did that? Folks, I'm an expert. Every day when I leave work, I do this.
But that's not even the worst part. SIGTEDWA would also allow any law enforcement officer to inspect the records required to be maintained pursuant to this section during business hours. Forget warrants. This doesn't even limit it to the scope of an investigation. The way this reads, a park ranger could come in on his lunch break and check your records to find out what his wife got him for Christmas. Now, before I let you go, I just wanted to point out that the video Taylor shared a couple of days ago with the legally registered potato silencer actually has a wee little practical use. Obviously not in a center fire pistol cartridge as the video we saw, but it turns out the IRA actually did make use of potatoes to suppress the sound of a .22 LR fired from an homemade pistol. This is the part where if I was a bad person, I would affect a bad Irish accent and make a joke about potatoes. But I will do no such thing. Well, folks, rounds complete on 2, but before I go, your moment of completion. I love you.
Rapid fire. Ah, it's out of gas. I'm gonna try and trigger its bump mechanism. It knows it's under attack. It's angry. It's angry. God, hide! Help us,